Hi, everyone. My name is Tim Mikhelashvili, CEO and co-founder of Pharma, an agency that specializes in performance analytics for life sciences. Also host of the Medical Innovation Olympics, which is coming up in October, a global, fully virtual event and a very unique opportunity for you to accelerate innovation in our industry. That's what we're here to talk about every week. We're going to share some clips from previous weekly sessions and also talk about one of my favorite healthcare events, Financial Times Pharma Bio Summit in the US that took place in May, which we summarized, which was also titled Investing and Innovating in a Challenging Healthcare Ecosystem. And so this is the opportunity that we will be talking about today. I have with me our last year's competitor and current expert judge, John Hemming, and Chris Piedmont, last year's speaker, investor, and also, again, an expert judge. Welcome. John and Chris, I'd like to open it up for you to invite our audience. Why should they attend? What makes this particular opportunity unique and different from others?
Chris, do you want to go first? Or
yeah, I'd be happy to. Absolutely. It's more than one thing, Tim, and that's, I think, something we do need to talk about. First of all, it gives the participants, the competitors, the opportunity to put their message as to what they're doing in front of a large audience, not only the judges, but the other competitors and all of those listening. In many cases, that type of exposure can help accelerate the development of something new. Developing new drugs, new treatments, new ways of managing medical care is not a solo undertaking. It's a team sport. And in many cases, you'll find those teammates, those people that'll help you through events like this. So there's certainly that. The other aspect of it is it does give the competitors the opportunity to polish their skills. They get to work with us to improve their pitches, to talk about the things that are important, help them, push to the background the things that maybe they shouldn't be talking about, and overall improve how they present what they're doing to increase the likelihood that they'll get the resources they need, whether that be cash or access to other expertise or facilities or whatever it might be. So, there's more than one reason that this is a worthwhile undertaking. And I strongly encourage anyone who's doing any work in the medical field, whether it be development of treatments or drugs or procedures, or even working on the business side of things to help streamline how medical care gets provided, to participate in the Medical Olympics this year.
Thanks. Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
John, what's your perspective
it's very similar to Chris's. There is basically no downside of participating. And what I would emphasize is it's a difficult area, all the medical stuff. We would come to that a bit more later, but it's complicated. It's intellectually complicated, and you won't get it right the first time. And you don't actually have many opportunities of practicing, experimenting with what you're putting forward, and discussing it in an environment where there's no downside. If you're presenting to investors, you're only going to get a few opportunities. And if you miss out on those opportunities, then you've lost it. With this, if you don't win, you don't win. That's not a problem. There's prizes for winning, but there's no booby prizes for not winning. Basically, you get the experience of putting forward your ideas, having them challenged by people in an environment where the only way is up.
Yeah, I want to bring up to stage Janelle Hardesty, whom I've known for many years, a medical affairs leader, seasoned executive with health economics, operations, and field medical team experience as well. Janelle, you're an expert judge in the inaugural event as well as the second one. We're glad to have you back. Janelle, tell us what makes this particular competition different, and also feel free to introduce yourself again. Oh, you're on mute there, Janelle. Yeah.
Sorry about that. My dog had been barking in the background. I apologize. So yes, I'm Janelle Hardesty, and I'm really thrilled to be part of this this event again. It's just a great experience and something that anyone has any sort of concept or product should participate in. As I've said in the past on these events, that we really should get as many people engaged as possible. I think that John and Chris said it very eloquently that really this is an opportunity to showcase your idea, your concept, your product, and there's no downside. Like John said, whether or not you win, that's not really the purpose of this. It's about getting exposure, about getting feedback, and it's about networking. I think that that's one of the key opportunities here, is to network with others and to find those potential relationships that you might not have had outside of this event. So that's one of the things that I found really exciting for the first annual event, was the networking opportunities. So that's one of the things I'd like to really highlight.
Yeah. And if you're watching this, you may be in healthcare, you may be on the business side or investment side. All of you probably think about that turning point of what makes somebody successful, right? You may perform at a very high level, but what is that difference, right, that makes you successful, that's recognized by others? And that is really the networking. A lot of the networking scientists from Notre Dame, from Harvard, Laszlo Barabashi, who has a book called The Formula, he makes that distinction between what success is versus what performance is, which is bound, right? Performance always has a high bound, but success can be scaled. And that difference is really the community, right? Mm-hmm. That we're forming. So this is a chance for you to make that once in a lifetime connection with someone at this year's event that may make that difference for your venture, for your concept or product as well. I want to share a quick clip from last week's session that we had from Bart Zoni, who's from Woven Healthcare Collective, who's our sponsor this year, and who's also an expert judge. Okay.
The last place I want to get stumped is a pitch that the stakes are high. If you're in a situation where you're pitching or you're in a business meeting and you're like close to the finish line and somebody asks you a question you don't have a good answer for, it's the worst timing for it, right? So getting reps in for people that have been through it, know what the questions are like, know what the challenges are like, and getting that practice and building muscle memory, super important. So when you're in that situation, you've done it a million times. I mean, think about, there's no high jumper in the world that's run up to the bar for the first time in the Olympics. That's not the way that it works. And this is a fantastic training ground because sure, it's tense, but it's a venue where the stakes, what's the worst thing that happens? You make some new friends, and when the stakes are like that, it's so worth doing.
Yeah, and so that I think is very much aligned with what Chris mentioned earlier. All right, the fact that you get a chance to practice, to refine your concept, your idea, right, in a very intense, but at the same time very collegial type of environment here, right? Because healthcare now has become a very controversial subject. It's the topic of a lot of controversy. There's a lot of excitement in terms of the innovation out there, but in order for it to reach the patients across the globe, regardless of where they live, right, we need to really accelerate and get all the right players involved, from policymakers to payers to patient advocacy groups to pharma as well. Right. And it's very complex. So it is very much high stakes for a lot of the founders that may enter this event, which we already have great examples of from the Olympic trials that we had in June. right? I want to talk a little bit about the current healthcare ecosystem now, right? And why it's so difficult to innovate and invest in the right areas that may allow more patients to live longer, better lives. Okay, and that was highlighted at the Financial Times summit that I always attend. I usually summarize the highlights from it for the last few years. There's quite a lot of movement across the globe. The United States has generally been the leader in terms of R&D and research and development. Only makes up 4% of the entire globe, but 75% of the drug development is generated by the United States. Okay, and however, the resources are being questioned, right, and allocated, and that's affecting patients, right? So a country like China, right, is now has where it has been known as a leader in generics, right, generic medicines, or a lot of processes and manufacturing, is now also taking the lead in terms of R&D as well. There's a lot of talent and incentives that are now kind of shifting the balance or the status that the U.S. has. And that was discussed at the Financial Times from different perspectives, from the pharma perspective, scientist, as well as from investment banker Tim Oppler, who used to work at pharma companies, and who saw how 50% of one pharma company, for example, had Chinese researchers and scientists who were instrumental to the company, right, to the drug discovery, development, across all the stages of pharma, of development. However, not one of them had received the promotion there, right, if to a VP level or above. And more recently, he had seen that at many other pharma companies, where the people who actually discover these innovative medicines or who are instrumental do not often have the opportunities to be recognized, right? Probably. And as a result, now China has many different incentives, 1,000 Talents program, others that were highlighted at the Financial Times summit, where Tim Oppler provided this kind of intriguing view that you need to incentivize innovation, right, on an organizational level as well, providing resources, but also recognize the right people, which is shifting that balance a little bit. This is an article that I recently summarized. We linked to it in our comments. What are some of the other highlights that maybe one of you would like to share? John, maybe you'd like to get us going from that,
Well, the
Financial Times.
I think the real difficulty behind everything is that life is complicated. As in, when I say life, I mean like not just living as a human being is complicated, but actually the way living creatures function is complicated, very, very complicated. And when you have like the autonomous nervous system, which can switch how a body is working, how it's functioning, on the basis of what the human being or other mammal is thinking, and it then drives glucose levels and it drives adrenaline and all sorts of things. You have a very difficult regulatory environment, a very difficult environment rather, in terms of doing even testing to find out what does what and whether placebos have a nocebo effect and things like that. And the regulatory environment, things like the regulatory environment, things like to what extent you can get intellectual property, therefore it's worth investing in getting through the regulatory environment. All of these things, the interplay is very complex. And in the end, people's health is very important to them. And they can often be persuaded to spend a lot of money and take risks. And there are some of the gene therapies around are really not particularly well proven, but people are persuaded to take the risk of going through those gene therapies, and some people get harmed by them. So it's all, I could go in at great length looking at individual examples of problems with different things, but the interplay between regulation, looking at the most favored nation, the idea, for instance, that for people to sell things in the USA, they've got to be charged no more than India. Well, that's a really difficult thing, because you then start into well, if you've got a business based in Ireland that's selling in Europe, selling in India, will they actually want to sell in America if they have to sell at that price? It's not easy. And I don't want to get, obviously I'll get involved in UK politics because I have been for decades, but I don't want to get involved in American politics. But these things are complicated. They're not things you can just simply wave a magic wand and it all becomes very easy.
Yeah, there was a very intriguing commentary from Callie Means, founder of TrueMed, at the Financial Times Summit. Who he's an advisor to the, of course, HHS here in the United States, and he talked about how the metrics of success should be longevity and disease reversal, instead of just managing disease and chronic disease. He really highlighted the chronic disease process, and we have been very intentional at our event of always highlighting the value of preventive and medicine and longevity medicine.
Although he's right about that, but when do you measure it? How many years is it before you measure the success?
Yeah,
and this is why people looking for biomarkers of health span and things like the methylation clocks and things like that. How do you measure whether an intervention today has improved somebody's health in 15 years? You can't measure it until 15 years have passed. That's really hard. That's what is that in American terms? That's over 3 presidential terms.
Yeah.
Right?
And the regulatory
it is really, although it's very true, and health span and the geroscience hypothesis I think is true if you intervene in the core geroscience pathway, which I think is all to do with levels of acetylation in the nucleus. But whatever it may be, if you intervene in that, I think yes, it improves lots of different things. However, measuring it in itself, measuring human lifespan experiments, we don't know for years to come. That's why people use C. elegans, which lasts perhaps a couple of weeks. Then measuring things in a creature that has no senescent cells in itself is flawed.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of complexity.
It's very complicated, yeah. That's why this contest is such a good one to get involved in, because it allows people to practice their complications and to hone their science in an environment with little risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'm highlighting here just a couple of comments from Tim Hunt, for example, who's a CEO of Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, who really, I think, brought to light the reality that people have been feeling. Patients, everyone in the healthcare industry who've been feeling some headwinds, right? Some limitations, regulatory pathway, which is very difficult for some of these longevity medicines where there is also quite a lot of innovation. But they need to prove it over long-term studies, and usually some of them always start with an indication such as, let's say, Alzheimer's or some other indication in order to kind of prove the first application before it becomes labeled as a longevity medicine, medication, for example, right? But how do you create these tailwinds? How do you? And that's the question he asked, right? Which is, I think, a very provocative question, which we're trying to answer in our Medical Innovation Olympics, right? We're trying to accelerate that. Right?
What I would say is the Medical Affairs Innovation Olympics provides a tailwind for people who wish to sort of set their sail in that particular way. And there aren't very many things that do that. It is hard. I spent 10 years in the House of Commons in the UK studying and being on the committee that dealt with regulatory reform. And this is the broader sense of regulation, not just medical regulation. And it's something that's very complex.
Yeah. And just to before I hear from Chris and Janelle, just to kind of talk about the longevity, I want to highlight one of the speakers that I was inspired by, Joe Betts-Lacroix from Retro Biosciences, who's actually bringing a longevity treatment to Alzheimer's patients. Right, they have 3 longevity medicine programs. And so there is quite a lot of hope that we're seeing. That I just wanted to kind of recognize. Maybe this is a company that we should be watching also. And okay, so any other comments on? We talked a lot about longevity medicine, but there's a lot of innovation in ADCs, and for example, in oncology. Antibody drug complexes, which are limited by toxicity. They have a very narrow therapeutic potential, narrow therapeutic index. However, there's a lot of improvement, for example, in that area, which I learned from that conference. Anything else? Any other innovation that you could highlight from this article, or what you're looking forward to in life sciences? Janelle, Chris.
I felt it was really interesting how they brought up AI and the use of study designs and regulatory impacts. How they were looking at specifically one study that only had 15 patients in it, but they were bringing it potentially to market with just 15 patients because of the use of AI. That to me was very interesting. And I think that AI and the use in medical affairs is going to be really impactful as it gets a greater hold and is utilized more often. I think that that's going to be something that really needs to be looked at and evaluated as to how much AI is impacting medical affairs. And I think that that's something that is something, really needs to maybe would be an interesting concept to look at if anyone has any concepts around AI in medical affairs to bring that forward.
Yeah, we need, you bring up a great point, Janelle. We need more competitors for medical affairs. This event started out as a medical affairs innovation Olympics. We've expanded it based on the nature of the submissions that we have received since then, right? But medical affairs is certainly an important one of the 6 innovation tracks we have, as well as marketing. We haven't received any submissions there. We have quite a lot in medtech, drugs, devices, and diagnostics. But this is a great, I think, invitation from Janelle and from all of us for more medical affairs leaders, to submit their proposals, their concepts or products. I just pulled up this section of this article on data culture and maturity, Janelle, and probably the biggest use case for AI is in drug discovery and drug development. One question that I asked Bayer's U.S. President Sebastian Guth live, in front of the audience was, what are some platforms you're using currently, or some approaches to justify the investments or resources more objectively, in order to meet the new demands for higher accountability? And his response, I captured his response in this article, and his response was really to be that their focus is on combining scientific expertise with analytics to make sure that they eliminate failure rates. So that gave me a good understanding of where the industry is, which was also backed up by another comment by another expert panelist, Priya Singhal from Biogen, who said that, once again, her personal goal is to see that the failure rate decreases from 9 out of 10 times before bringing a treatment to patients, which we all know, right? 90% of all candidates fail. But her goal is to use AI to decrease that failure rate to, let's say, maybe 6 or 7 out of 10. Right? And so that was, so that was kind of I think an interesting, consensus that I saw, that there is an uptake, but most of the expert panelists rated the data maturity on a 3 from a scale of 10. From on a scale of 1 to 10. Right?
Yeah, and that's not surprising to me at all. In the work we've been doing at Neoterra in AI, it's a lot of what we hear today. A lot of the stuff you read is either flat out hype or edge cases where things have succeeded where in other places they have not. We really need to be careful about how we apply AI. There is this belief that the results it can produce are superior to what we can do on ourselves. There have been some studies, quite frankly, that have shown the opposite. That because of its lack of experience, because of its lack of having, let's call it a moral core, many of the things it will do are outside of the things that we would find acceptable or useful, and that's been a real challenge. It's only as good as the programmers that have programmed it. It's only as good as the data that's been provided to it. And it does make mistakes. I was just yesterday listening to the keynote speech from the Amazon Summit in New York City, where they were talking about their advances on their Bedrock AI platform. And, the president of the group was saying they were thrilled that they had achieved a 90% accuracy in the work they were doing. And, from my perspective, that's inadequate. Right. Would we all be willing to accept one mistake out of every 10 for every medical diagnosis we did, for every treatment we proposed, or for every analysis as to whether or not a drug was being effective? No, that is completely unacceptable. So we need to be careful about how we decide to apply these things, where we decide to apply them, and that we use them to help guide our own research and development and conclusions, not to replace them.
Yeah. Great point, Chris. Great point.
Yeah, I agree with Chris on that. The thing about AI, I find it very useful, but I'm sensitive to the fact that if you ask the same question in slightly different ways, it will give you contradictory answers. And so the way in which you ask a question guides very much the answer you get. And that, if you look at the idea of reducing the number of failures, if you use AI to filter out, say, half of the drug candidates, it may also filter out some really good ones as well. Yeah. So negative results can be quite useful. So you do need to be very, very careful not to treat it as the oracle, not an oracle in terms of a computer sense, the old Greek oracle.
Yeah, I always advise people, treat it like an intern. It has some knowledge, it has no experience. It is not familiar with your practices and how you see the world. It will take the information and it will synthesize something and it will give it back to you. And the hope is that in most cases it's accurate. But as working with an intern, double check the work, because as John has pointed out, I've had similar experiences where similar questions asked in different ways or instructions provided to do something do not produce what appears to us as a very intuitive outcome that should be correct. It doesn't always do that. You get some very surprising, inaccurate, or incomplete results. Mm-hmm. And that, when working in the medical field especially, is very dangerous.
Yeah,
so true.
Yeah, Chris, and your points kind of triggered this kind of highlight as well in my mind from Faisal Khan, who talked about the fact that a lot of the data is not clean and it's not ready for AI. Mm-hmm. A critical first step in achieving data readiness. An AI algorithm without data is useless, he said. Right, and and so I think it's a point worth mentioning here again and emphasizing that in the clinical trials themselves are becoming more complex as well, right? Which Janelle mentioned earlier, and as was highlighted in this, this summit as well, right? There's a lot of platform studies, and there's a lot of amendments during the clinical studies that happen very often. And so AI is not always the best to use, particularly later in the stages during the regulatory, when it's already decision time, when it's high stakes. So it's these are a lot of important points to consider. But let's turn towards investment side. From the investment side, a lot of investors are also finding that they want to invest later on in pharma, and there's been somewhat of a a pause in the investment landscape, is right, based on a lot of the comments at the Financial Times. But there's much more to benefit if you invest earlier, and they're realizing that they're investing in one product versus a lot of mergers. We're not hearing as many mergers and acquisitions as we did before, right? And that's what brings me back to this event here, where you're seeing concepts, you're seeing sneak peeks, preview of a lot of companies that will be successful, that already have become since the last 4 years. Right. And so before I ask each one of you to just comment, make your final invitation start, I want to highlight one clip from the learning that takes place, to give everyone an idea of the panels, okay, and the type of learning that takes place at the opening ceremony as well. So here it is.
I'm an avid reader, and I recently read Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, Be Useful. And I thought it was great, not because it was a great work of art, but because it has a great principle in there. And that is true of most athletes at the very edge of performance. And we find it in most businesses as well who are there, is that they learn from their competitors who do something better than them.
Yeah, I think what I really would focus on is the voice of customer and voice of employee.
Absolutely.
Because I really feel that, from a customer service, customer experience perspective, of course, we need to do these surveys, and we talked about what biases are within. But like I mentioned before, from an employee perspective, these are the people that drive the company. These are the people that do the work. If they're not bought in and they don't understand that vision and they're not on board, you're not going to have those results. And so the people in the organization reflect the organization, and then that gets reflected in your customer service and experiences and outcomes. So those voices are incredibly important.
And I think exactly what the two of you have offered are very complementary. The one piece of advice I would give people is, as a leader, find someone who will compensate for your blind spots. Make sure that you have them on speed dial and they're ready to help you, because I don't know what your blind spots are, but if you think you don't have them, you're missing something major, and you need to find it. Even the guy who researches biases says, I cannot undo my own biases. I have to have a thought partner who sees them for me.
All right, so that's a very good note, I think, on which to invite those of you who are watching this, who may see this in your feed, who are potential competitors or attendees, to join this community of innovators in a very exciting, flexible setting, on demand, virtual, where you'll be able to hear a lot of different perspectives to take your ideas and concepts to the next level. Because that's the difference that you need, regardless of what high performer you are today, into turning that performance into success that's recognized by more people globally. Any last invitations here? We have 2 weeks remaining until early bird pricing ends. Anticipation's here. We can't wait. So
yeah, I would certainly add that, to further comment on that clip you just played, the perspective that is brought to bear during our events is considerable. You have business people, you have investors, you have researchers, technologists, medical affairs people, marketing, all the aspects that go into taking something from a concept through the development of a venture and bringing something to market will be present there. It's a rare opportunity to get in front of that diverse a group that has specialty and interests in medical and biological work. So I'd strongly encourage anyone who's looking for that perspective to come and participate in the event.
I think that's it really. Just do it. If you don't believe in your idea, don't do it. But if you believe in your idea, do it. And if you don't believe in the idea, give up.
Okay. Always great advice, John. By the way, a lot of advice.
If you don't believe in your idea, what the sense are you doing it? Because you're not going to persuade anyone else, And if you believe in it, participate.
Yeah, this is hard. What everyone who comes to this event is trying to do is difficult. It's truly challenging, and it does take that Olympian type of dedication, the belief that you can succeed, the desire to achieve the outcome, the willingness to put in the work. It's a great parallel, and it's very, very true.
Yeah, great. Janelle, anything else?
I would just reiterate my invitation to medical affairs and marketing to, if anyone has any concepts in those categories, to please submit your concepts. We really invite those folks to join the Innovation Olympics.
Great. Well, see you next week, Thursday. I'll post the link on how you can register. See you guys soon.
Thank you, Tim.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
All right.